The late summer sun hung low over the rolling wheat fields of Willow Creek, Nebraska, casting golden streaks across the weathered barn where Clara Hensley stood, her hands trembling as she clutched a yellowed envelope. At 62, Clara was no stranger to the aches of farm life. Decades of hauling hay bales and mending fences had etched lines into her face, each one a testament to her resilience. But this moment, standing in the dusty loft of her family's old barn, felt heavier than any chore. The envelope, tucked inside a rusted tobacco tin she'd found beneath a loose floorboard, bore her brother's handwriting. Samuel Hensley had vanished from this very farm 18 years ago, in the fall of 2007, leaving behind a void that had never healed. Clara's boots creaked on the worn planks as she sat on an old milking stool, the scent of ancient hay and motor oil thick in the air. The letter was dated October 12, 2007, the day before Samuel disappeared. Her fingers hesitated before tearing it open, as if the paper held a truth she wasn't ready to face. The words inside were scrawled in haste, the ink smudged in places. Clara, if you're reading this, I'm likely gone. Don't trust the co-op. They're hiding something in the old grain elevator, tests, chemicals, things they don't want anyone to know. I saw too much. If I don't make it, find Dr. Ellis. He knows. Be careful. Sam. Clara's heart thudded against her ribcage. The Willow Creek Co-op, a cornerstone of the community for decades, had been Samuel's employer. He'd been a mechanic, fixing their tractors and combines, always tinkering with engines under the Nebraska sky. Everyone had assumed he'd run off, debts, a bad breakup, or just the wanderlust of a man in his 30s. But Clara had never believed it. Samuel loved this land, the way the wheat swayed like an ocean, the hum of cicadas at dusk. He wouldn't have left without a word. She folded the letter and tucked it into her jacket pocket, her mind racing. The co-op was still the lifeblood of Willow Creek, its grain elevator looming over the town like a sentinel. But things had changed since 2007. The co-op had merged with Agricor, a massive agribusiness that brought new machinery, new chemicals, and new faces who didn't linger at the diner to swap stories. Clara had heard whispers, farmers losing leases, strange deliveries at odd hours, but she'd chalked it up to small-town gossip. Now, Samuel's letter suggested something darker. Descending the ladder, Clara glanced at the rusted weather vane atop the barn, its rooster frozen mid-spin. The farm, once bustling with her parents' laughter and Samuel's endless projects, had been hers alone since her mother passed 5 years ago. She'd kept it running, growing enough wheat to get by, but the emptiness of the place gnawed at her. Samuel's absence was a wound that refused to close, and this letter was a spark reigniting her resolve. She drove her old Ford pickup into town, the radio crackling with a Johnny Cash tune. Willow Creek was a speck on the map, 2 stoplights, a diner called Mabel's, and a hardware store that still sold parts for tractors older than Clara. The grain elevator, painted a faded red, stood at the edge of town, surrounded by fields that stretched to the horizon. As she parked near Mabel's, Clara noticed a sleek black SUV idling across the street, its tinted windows out of place among the dusty pickups. A chill ran through her. Was she being watched? Inside the diner, the air smelled of coffee and fried bacon. Clara slid into a booth, nodding at Mabel, who was pouring coffee for a group of farmers in overalls. She needed to find Dr. Ellis, but the name wasn't familiar. Samuel's letter had been specific, though. Dr. Ellis knew something. Clara pulled out her phone, an old flip model she barely used, and called her friend June, a retired librarian who knew everyone in Willow Creek. Dr. Ellis? June's voice crackled through the receiver. That'd be Walter Ellis, the agronomist. Worked for the co-op back in the day, testing soil and crops. Lives out on County Road 14 now, keeps to himself. Why do you ask? Clara hesitated. Just tying up some old family business. Thanks, June. She hung up, her mind buzzing. An agronomist would know about chemicals, experiments, whatever Samuel had stumbled onto. But why would the co-op, a place built on community, hide something worth killing for? Clara sipped her coffee, her eyes drifting to the SUV outside. It hadn't moved. Chapter 2, The Road to Answers. The drive to County Road 14 took Clara past fields of golden wheat, the stalks bending in the warm breeze. Her pickup rattled over the gravel, kicking up dust that swirled in the rearview mirror. Walter Ellis's house was a modest ranch-style home, its paint peeling like the skin of an overripe peach. A rusted tractor sat in the yard, half covered by a tarp, a relic of the farm it once served. Clara knocked, her knuckles firm against the warped door. A man in his late 70s answered, his face weathered but sharp, with piercing blue eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses. "You're Clara Hensley," he said, not a question. "Heard you might come someday." "You knew Samuel?" Clara asked, her voice steady despite the knot in her stomach. Walter nodded, stepping aside to let her in. The living room smelled of old books and linseed oil, shelves lined with jars of soil samples and faded agricultural journals. "Samuel was a good kid," Walter said, settling into a worn armchair. "Too curious for his own good. Asked too many questions about the co-op's new fertilizer trials." Clara pulled out the letter, handing it to him. Walter's hands trembled as he read, his jaw tightening. "I told him to stop digging," he said quietly. "AgriCorps was running tests in that elevator, unapproved chemicals, stuff that didn't belong in any field. They called it Project Yield. Said it was for better crops, but I saw the data. It wasn't about wheat. It was about control." "Control of what?" Clara pressed. Walter glanced at the window, as if expecting someone. "Land. Farmers. The whole damn town. Those chemicals didn't just boost yields, they changed the soil, made it dependent on AgriCorps products. Farmers who didn't comply lost their leases. Samuel saw the storage tanks, the sealed crates. He was going to blow the whistle." Clara's mind reeled. Samuel had always been stubborn, the kind of man who'd fix a broken combine with nothing but a wrench and a prayer. If he'd found proof of something this big, he wouldn't have backed down. "Did they kill him?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Walter's eyes darkened. "I don't know. But after he disappeared, AgriCorps tightened their grip. Paid off the sheriff, bought out half the farms. I quit before they could fire me. Been watching my back ever since." A loud knock interrupted them. Walter froze, his hand reaching for a baseball bat by the door. Clara's pulse quickened as she peered through the curtains. The black SUV from town was parked in the driveway, its engine still running. "Get out through the back," Walter whispered, shoving the letter into her hands. "Don't come back here. Find the old elevator logs, they're in the co-op's office, hidden in the file room. They'll show what Samuel found." Clara slipped out the back door, her boots silent on the grass. As she reached her truck, hidden behind a row of pines, she heard the front door creak open and a man's voice, low and commanding. "Where's the woman, Ellis?" Heart pounding, Clara climbed into her truck and drove, the letter burning a hole in her pocket. Samuel had uncovered a secret worth dying for, and now she was picking up where he left off. The grain elevator loomed in her mind, its silhouette a grim promise of answers, and danger. Clara Hensley's pickup rumbled down the backroads of Willow Creek, Nebraska, the night air heavy with the scent of earth and diesel. Her hands gripped the steering wheel, knuckles white, as she replayed Walter Ellis's words, "Find the old elevator logs, they're in the co-op's office, hidden in the file room." The black SUV that had followed her to Walter's house was nowhere in sight, but the weight of being watched clung to her like damp wool. Samuel's letter, tucked inside her jacket, felt like a ticking bomb. Her brother had stumbled onto something big, AgriCorps' secret experiments in the grain elevator, and now Clara was wading into the same danger. She pulled into the gravel lot behind her farmhouse, the porch light casting a feeble glow over the sagging steps. The barn loomed in the distance, its silhouette a reminder of the letter that had set this all in motion. Clara locked the truck and scanned the darkness, half expecting headlights to pierce the night. Nothing. Just the chirp of crickets and the rustle of wheat in the breeze. Inside, she bolted the door and spread the letter on her kitchen table, its words searing into her mind. "Don't trust the co-op. They're hiding something in the old grain elevator." The Willow Creek Co-op office was a squat brick building next to the elevator, its windows dark after hours. Breaking in wasn't Clara's style, she'd spent her life respecting the land and its people, but Samuel deserved justice. She grabbed a flashlight, a crowbar from the shed, and a thermos of coffee. If she was going to sneak into the co-op, she'd need to stay sharp. The clock read 1 a.m. when Clara parked her truck a half-mile from town, hidden behind a stand of cottonwoods. She hiked through the fields, the flashlight beam cutting through the inky dark, revealing rows of wheat that swayed like silent witnesses. The grain elevator towered ahead, its faded red paint peeling under the moonlight. The co-op office sat in its shadow, a single security light flickering above the door. Clara crouched behind a rusted combine, scanning the lot. No cars, no guards. The co-op relied on the town's trust, not high-tech security. She crept to the back door, the crowbar cold in her hands. The lock was old, a simple deadbolt, and it gave way with a groan after a few minutes of prying. Inside, the air smelled of dust and ink, the kind of stale office scent that hadn't changed since the 1980s. Filing cabinets lined the walls, their labels faded but legible: crop yields, 2000 to 2010, equipment maintenance, fertilizer orders. Walter had said the elevator logs were hidden, so Clara bypassed the obvious drawers and checked the bottom of a cabinet marked miscellaneous. Her fingers brushed a false panel, loose and slightly warped. She pried it open, revealing a stack of yellowed binders labeled Project Yield, 2005 to 2008. Her pulse quickened. This was it, Samuel's discovery. She pulled out a binder and flipped it open. Pages of data listed chemical compounds with names like XC47 and YieldMax9, alongside soil test results and crop growth charts. Notes in the margins, written in a tight, unfamiliar hand, mentioned accelerated dependency and soil lock-in. Clara wasn't a scientist, but she'd grown wheat her whole life. These weren't standard fertilizers. They were designed to make the land useless without Agricor's products, trapping farmers in a cycle of debt and control. One entry, dated October 10, 2007, caught her eye: Test Site 3, elevator storage, compromised. Unauthorized access detected. Recommend immediate containment. Clara's breath hitched. Samuel had been in that elevator, seen something he wasn't supposed to. She stuffed the binder into her backpack, her hands shaking. As she turned to leave, a floorboard creaked outside the office. She froze, clicking off her flashlight. Footsteps, slow and deliberate, echoed in the hallway. Someone was inside. Clara pressed herself against the cabinet, her heart pounding. The footsteps stopped, replaced by the faint jingle of keys. A man's voice muttered, too low to make out words. She peeked through a crack in the door, catching a glimpse of a tall figure in a dark jacket, a flashlight beam sweeping the hall. Not a security guard, his movements were too cautious, too practiced. Clara's mind raced. Was this one of Agricor's enforcers, sent to clean up loose ends? She clutched the crowbar, her palms slick with sweat. The figure moved toward the office, his light grazing the doorframe. Clara held her breath, praying the shadows would hide her. The man paused, then turned, his boots thudding toward the front of the building. A door slammed, and silence returned. Clara waited, counting to 60, before slipping out the back door and sprinting to the cottonwoods. Back in her truck, she drove home, checking her rearview mirror every few seconds. The binder sat heavy in her lap, its pages a map to Samuel's fate. At home, she spread the documents on her kitchen table, poring over them by lamplight. The logs detailed shipments of unmarked chemicals to the elevator, overseen by a man named Victor Crane, Agricor's regional manager in 2007. Clara remembered him vaguely, a slick-talking suit who'd shown up at town meetings, promising prosperity. He'd left Willow Creek shortly after Samuel vanished, replaced by a new manager who kept to himself. Clara needed help. She couldn't decode the scientific jargon alone, and Walter Ellis was too exposed after the SUV incident. She thought of Amos Reed, a retired farmer who'd worked with Samuel at the co-op. Amos was pushing 70, with a bad hip and a sharp mind, and he'd always had a soft spot for Samuel. If anyone could shed light on the co-op's inner workings, it was him. The next morning, Clara drove to Amos's farm, a sprawling spread of corn and soybeans 10 miles out of town. His house was a clapboard relic, surrounded by old tractors he restored for county fairs. Amos greeted her with a nod, his weathered face creasing into a smile. Clara Hensley. Been a while. What's got you out here so early? She showed him the binder, explaining Samuel's letter and the break-in. Amos's smile faded as he scanned the pages. This ain't right, he muttered. These chemicals, they're not for farming. They're for owning. Agricor wanted to lock us into their system, make us beg for their seeds, their sprays. Samuel caught wind of it, didn't he? Clara nodded. He saw something in the elevator. Something worth hiding. Amos rubbed his chin, his eyes distant. Back in '07, I heard rumors. Strange smells from the elevator, trucks coming in at night. Samuel asked me about it once, said he'd seen crates marked hazardous that weren't on any inventory. I told him to let it go. Should have listened to him. Clara leaned forward. Amos, do you know Victor Crane? Amos's face darkened. Crane was trouble. Smooth as oil, but ruthless. Ran the co-op like his personal kingdom. After Samuel disappeared, Crane got real quiet, then left town. Heard he's back, though, lives in Lincoln now, working for some agribusiness lobbying group. Clara's stomach twisted. If Crane was behind Samuel's disappearance, he might still be pulling strings. I need to talk to him, she said. Amos shook his head. You don't just walk up to a man like Crane. He's got money, connections. And if he's tied to this, he tapped the binder. You're stirring up a hornet's nest. As Clara drove back to town, the black SUV appeared in her rearview mirror, trailing just close enough to make her palms sweat. She turned onto a side road, then another, but it stayed with her, its tinted windows hiding the driver's face. Clara's mind raced. She couldn't go home, not with that binder in her truck. She needed a plan, and fast, before Agricor's shadows closed in. Clara Hensley's heart hammered as she gripped the steering wheel, the black SUV's headlights glaring in her rearview mirror. The gravel road stretched dark and endless through the Nebraska night, the wheat fields on either side offering no cover. She'd been driving aimlessly for 20 minutes, trying to shake the tail, but the SUV clung to her like a shadow. The binder from the co-op office, stuffed under the passenger seat, felt like a lead weight. Its pages held proof of Agricor's secret experiments, chemicals that locked farmers into dependency, and maybe the key to her brother Samuel's disappearance 18 years ago. Clara took a sharp turn onto a dirt path, her truck's tires spitting gravel. The SUV followed, its engine a low growl. She couldn't lead them to her farmhouse, it was too isolated, too vulnerable. Instead, she headed for the old county fairgrounds, a sprawling lot dotted with empty livestock barns and rusted carnival rides. At this hour, it would be deserted, but the open space might give her a chance to lose them, or at least see who she was dealing with. She killed her headlights and parked behind a dilapidated 4H shed, crouching low in the cab. The SUV slowed, its beam sweeping the lot, then rolled past, disappearing toward town. Clara waited, her breath shallow, until the hum of its engine faded. She didn't trust the silence. Whoever was following her knew she was onto something. She needed to move fast. Amos Reed's warning echoed in her mind, you don't just walk up to a man like Victor Crane. Crane, the former co-op manager, was her next lead. If he'd overseen Project Yield in 2007, he knew what Samuel had uncovered in the grain elevator. Clara pulled out her phone and searched for Crane's name, her fingers clumsy on the tiny keys. A quick call to June, the retired librarian, confirmed Crane's address, a gated community in Lincoln, 90 miles away. Clara didn't relish the idea of confronting a man like Crane, but she was out of options. Samuel's letter, find Dr. Ellis. He knows, had led her to Walter, and Walter had pointed to the elevator logs. Now, the logs pointed to Crane. Clara drove home under the cover of darkness, parking her truck in the barn to hide it. She packed a bag with the binder, Samuel's letter, a change of clothes, and her father's old hunting knife, its blade still sharp after decades. By dawn, she was on the road to Lincoln, the thermos of coffee her only companion. The Nebraska landscape rolled by, fields of corn and soybeans, punctuated by weathered silos and faded billboards for seed companies. Every mile felt like a step deeper into Samuel's world, a place where trust was a luxury and secrets were buried in the soil. Lincoln was a city of wide streets and low buildings, a far cry from Willow Creek's sleepy charm. Crane's address led Clara to a manicured neighborhood of sprawling homes, their lawns pristine and their gates guarded by cameras. She parked across the street from Crane's house, a modern two-story with floor-to-ceiling windows. A silver Lexus sat in the driveway, gleaming under the morning sun. Clara's pickup, with its chipped paint and rusted fender, stood out like a sore thumb. She'd have to be quick. She slipped on a baseball cap, tucking her graying hair beneath it, and approached the gate, buzzing the intercom. No answer. She buzzed again, then noticed a delivery van pulling up. Thinking fast, she waved at the driver, a young man in a brown uniform. "Hey, I'm here to see Mr. Crane," she said, holding up an empty envelope. "Got a package for him." The driver shrugged and opened the gate. Clara followed him to the front door, her heart pounding. When he left, she knocked, gripping the binder under her jacket. The door opened, revealing a man in his 60s, tall and lean, with slick-back silver hair and eyes like cold steel. Victor Crane. "Mr. Crane?" Clara said, her voice steady. "I'm Clara Hensley. Samuel Hensley's sister." Crane's face betrayed nothing, but his hand tightened on the doorframe. "I don't know any Samuel Hensley," he said smoothly. "You've got the wrong house." "I've got proof you knew him," Clara said, pulling the binder just far enough out to show its label, Project Yield. "You were running experiments at the Willow Creek Co-op in 2007. Samuel found out. Then he disappeared." Crane's eyes flicked to the binder, then back to her. "You're trespassing," he said, his voice low. "Leave, or I'll call the police." "I'm not leaving until you tell me what happened to my brother," Clara said, stepping closer. "What was in those crates in the elevator? Why did Samuel have to die?" Crane's jaw twitched, but before he could respond, a car pulled into the driveway, a black SUV, identical to the one that had tailed her. Two men in dark jackets stepped out, their faces obscured by sunglasses. Clara's stomach dropped. She'd walked into a trap. "Get inside," Crane snapped, grabbing her arm and pulling her into the house. Clara yanked free, clutching the binder as the door slammed shut. The living room was sterile, white furniture, glass tables, no trace of the rural grit she knew. Crane locked the door and turned to her, his composure cracking. "You have no idea what you're messing with," he hissed. "Those men out there? They're not mine. They're AgriCorps cleanup crew." Clara's mind raced. "Cleanup crew? For what? Covering up what you did to Samuel?" Crane laughed, a bitter sound. "You think I wanted him gone? Samuel was a problem, sure, but I didn't touch him. AgriCorps higher-ups, they don't tolerate leaks. Your brother saw the storage tanks, the chemical drums. He was going to the press. They made the call." "Who's they?" Clara demanded, her voice shaking with anger. "And why? What's worth killing for?" Crane paced, his polished shoes clicking on the hardwood. Project Yield wasn't just about crops. It was about power. Those chemicals changed the soil, made it reliant on AgriCorps products. Farmers who resisted lost everything: land, livelihoods. The elevator was their testing ground, and Samuel got too close. Clara's hands trembled, but she held his gaze. "So you let them kill him?" "I didn't let anything," Crane snapped. "I was a cog in the machine, same as anyone. After Samuel vanished, I got out. Moved here, kept my head down. But AgriCorps doesn't forget." A loud knock rattled the door. Crane froze, his face pale. "You brought them here," he whispered. "They'll kill us both." Clara's mind spun. She couldn't trust Crane, but she needed him alive. He was her only link to the truth. "Is there a back way out?" she asked. Crane nodded, pointing to a sliding door leading to a patio. "Through the yard, over the fence. My car's in the garage, keys are on the counter." Clara grabbed the keys and the binder, her eyes scanning the room for anything useful. A letter opener glinted on the desk. She pocketed it, its weight reassuring. They slipped out the back as the front door shuddered under heavy blows. Clara vaulted the fence, her joints protesting, and slid into Crane's Lexus. He followed, his breath ragged. As they sped out of the neighborhood, Clara glanced at Crane. "You're coming with me," she said. "You're going to tell me everything: names, dates, proof. For Samuel." Crane stared out the window, his face grim. "You don't know what you're asking," he said. "But fine. Head to Willow Creek. There's someone you need to meet, a farmer who worked with Samuel. He saw things, too. If we're lucky, he's still alive." Clara floored the gas, the city fading into fields. The black SUV would find them again, she was sure of it. But for the first time in 18 years, she felt closer to Samuel, to the truth he died for. The fight was far from over, and Clara Hensley wasn't backing down. Clara Hensley's hands were steady on the wheel of Victor Crane's Lexus, the highway stretching dark and endless toward Willow Creek, Nebraska. The binder from the co-op office, its pages filled with evidence of AgriCorps' chemical experiments, sat on the passenger seat beside Crane, who stared out the window, his face taut with fear. The black SUV that had chased Clara from Lincoln was nowhere in sight, but she knew better than to relax. AgriCorps' cleanup crew was out there, and they weren't the type to give up. Samuel's letter, tucked in her jacket, burned against her chest, a reminder of why she couldn't stop, no matter the cost. Crane had said they needed to find a farmer who'd worked with Samuel, someone who'd seen the same secrets in the grain elevator back in 2007. "His name's Harlan Tate," Crane muttered, breaking the silence. "Lives out on Route 6, near the old mill. He was a mechanic, like your brother. Quiet guy, but sharp. He quit the co-op a week after Samuel disappeared. Knows more than he lets on." Clara's eyes flicked to Crane. "Why didn't you mention him before?" Crane's jaw tightened. "Because Harlan's a ghost. Keeps to himself, doesn't trust anyone. If AgriCorps' watching, he's a target, same as us. I didn't want to drag him into this unless I had to." Clara didn't trust Crane. His slick demeanor and history with AgriCorps made him a snake in her book, but she needed every scrap of information. Harlan Tate might hold the missing piece of Samuel's story. As the lights of Willow Creek appeared on the horizon, Clara took a back road to avoid the main drag, her nerves frayed from the constant threat of pursuit. The grain elevator loomed in the distance, its silhouette a grim monument to her brother's fate. Harlan's farm was a ramshackle spread at the end of a rutted lane, surrounded by fields of alfalfa and corn. A single light glowed in the farmhouse window, casting shadows on a yard cluttered with old tractor parts and a rusted windmill. Clara parked behind a shed, cutting the engine. "Stay here," she told Crane, grabbing the binder and her father's hunting knife. "If you run, I'll find you." Crane gave a bitter laugh. "Run where? They're everywhere." Clara approached the house, her boots crunching on gravel. She knocked, the sound sharp in the quiet night. The door creaked open, revealing a wiry man in his late 60s, his face creased like old leather. Harlan Tate's eyes narrowed, taking in Clara's weathered jacket and the binder under her arm. "You're Samuel's sister," he said, his voice low. "Heard you were poking around." Clara nodded. "I found something, logs from the co-op, about Project Yield. Samuel wrote about it before he vanished. Said you might know what he saw in the elevator." Harlan's gaze flicked to the darkness beyond the porch, then back to her. "Get inside. Quick." The farmhouse smelled of coffee and motor oil, its walls lined with faded photos of county fairs and harvest seasons. Harlan locked the door and pulled the curtains. "You shouldn't be here," he said, sitting at a scarred oak table. "AgriCorp's got eyes all over. They've been watching me since I left the co-op." Clara set the binder on the table, opening it to the page about the elevator's chemical shipments. "Samuel saw something in there, crates, chemicals. These logs prove it." "What did he tell you?" Harlan rubbed his hands together, his fingers calloused from years of wrench work. "He came to me one night, October '07. Said he'd been fixing a conveyor in the elevator when he found a locked room, hidden behind a false wall. Crates inside, marked hazardous. He broke one open, found canisters of some gray powder, labeled XC-47. Smelled like nothing he'd ever known, made his eyes burn. He took a sample, said he was gonna get it tested." Clara's heart sank. "Did he?" Harlan shook his head. "Never got the chance. Next day, he was gone. I went looking for that room myself, but it was sealed up, like it never existed. I quit the co-op after that. Didn't want to end up like Samuel." Clara leaned forward, her voice urgent. "Do you know what XC-47 was? What they were doing with it?" Harlan's eyes darkened. "Not exactly. But I heard things, whispers from other mechanics. AgriCorp was testing something that didn't just boost crops. It changed the soil, made it sterile without their chemicals. They were locking farmers into their system, forcing them to buy or lose their land. That powder? I think it was the key. Samuel must have gotten too close." A loud thud outside made them both freeze. Harlan grabbed a shotgun from a rack by the door, his movements swift despite his age. "Stay here," he whispered, creeping to the window. Clara clutched the knife, her pulse racing. Through a gap in the curtains, she saw headlights, a black SUV, idling in the yard. "They found us," Clara said, her voice barely audible. She glanced at the binder, its pages a lifeline to Samuel's truth. "We need to get out." Harlan nodded, his face grim. "There's a cellar door out back, leads to the fields. Take the binder and go. I'll hold them off." Clara hesitated. "I'm not leaving you to face them alone." "You're not," Harlan said, racking the shotgun. "I've been waiting for this fight. Go to Mabel's diner, find Ruth Carter. She was Samuel's girlfriend back then. She's got something he left her, a journal, maybe proof. Now move." Clara grabbed the binder and slipped out the back, her boots silent on the grass. The cellar door was hidden under a pile of old tarps. She pried it open and descended into the damp darkness, the knife in one hand, the binder in the other. Above, she heard Harlan's shotgun blast, followed by shouts and the screech of tires. Her stomach twisted, but she kept moving, emerging into a cornfield that stretched into the night. She ran, the stalks slapping her face, until she reached a drainage ditch that led to the edge of town. Mabel's diner was a mile away, its neon sign a beacon in the dark. Clara's lungs burned as she stumbled inside, the bell above the door jingling. Ruth Carter, a wiry woman in her 50s with gray-streaked hair, was wiping down the counter. She froze when she saw Clara's dirt-streaked face and the binder in her arms. "Clara?" Ruth said, her voice trembling. "What's going on?" Clara locked the door behind her. "Samuel left you something, a journal. I need it. AgriCorp's after me, and it might be the only way to find out what happened to him." Ruth's eyes widened, but she nodded, pulling a key from her apron. "It's in the back, in a lockbox. He gave it to me the night before he disappeared. Said to keep it safe, no matter what." As Ruth disappeared into the kitchen, Clara glanced out the window. Headlights cut through the darkness, moving fast. The SUV was back, and this time, there was no escape. Clara gripped the knife, her resolve hardening. Samuel had died for the truth, and she'd fight to uncover it, no matter who stood in her way. Clara Hensley stood in the dim glow of Mabel's diner, her fingers tight around her father's hunting knife as the headlights of the black SUV swept across the windows. The vehicle idled outside, its engine a low growl that set her nerves on edge. Ruth Carter emerged from the kitchen, clutching a small metal lockbox, her face pale but determined. "This is it," Ruth said, setting the box on the counter. "Samuel's journal. He said it was his insurance policy." Clara's heart pounded as she glanced at the door. The SUV's doors opened, and two figures stepped out, their silhouettes tall and menacing under the neon light. "We don't have much time," Clara said, her voice low. "Open it." Ruth fumbled with the key, her hands shaking. The lock clicked, revealing a worn leather journal, its pages yellowed and edges frayed. Clara flipped it open, recognizing Samuel's tight scrawl instantly. The entries were dated September to October 2007, detailing his work at the Willow Creek Co-op and his growing suspicions about the grain elevator. One passage, dated October 11th, made her breath catch. "Found the hidden room again tonight. More canisters of XC-47, stacked to the ceiling. Took a sample, gray powder, smells like acid. Saw a manifest with Victor Crane's signature, but the shipments come from someone higher up. Agricorp's not just testing crops, they're poisoning the land. Meeting Dr. Ellis tomorrow. If I don't make it, Ruth, get this to Clara. She'll know what to do." Clara's eyes stung. Samuel had known he was in danger, had trusted her to finish what he started. She turned to Ruth. "Did he tell you anything else? Who was above Crane?" Ruth shook her head, her voice trembling. "He was scared, Clara. Said the co-op wasn't what it seemed, that Agricorp had people in town, cops, council members. He wanted to go to the state, but he never got the chance." A loud bang rattled the diner's door, followed by a man's voice, sharp and commanding. "Open up. We know you're in there." Clara shoved the journal into her backpack with the binder from the co-op office. "Is there another way out?" she asked. Ruth nodded, pointing to a side door behind the counter. "Leads to the alley. My car's parked there, an old Buick. Keys are in the ignition." Clara grabbed Ruth's arm. "Come with me. They'll come after you next." Ruth hesitated, then shook her head. "I've been running from this for 18 years. I'll stall them. Get that journal to someone who can help, someone outside Willow Creek." Clara wanted to argue, but the door shuttered again, wood splintering. She slipped through the side door, the cold night air hitting her like a slap. The Buick was a rusted relic, but it roared to life when she turned the key. As she peeled out of the alley, she saw the SUV's headlights swing toward her. The chase was on. She drove north, away from town, the journal and binder heavy in her backpack. Samuel's words pointed to someone above Victor Crane, someone pulling Agricorp's strings. Clara needed an ally, someone with enough clout to take on a corporation. Her mind went to Margaret Maggie Voss, a retired state agricultural inspector who'd once spoken at a county fair about soil conservation. Maggie lived in Grand Island, 60 miles away, and had a reputation for integrity. If anyone could help make sense of Samuel's evidence, it was her. The SUV gained on her, its headlights blinding in the rearview mirror. Clara floored the gas, the Buick rattling over the uneven road. She took a sharp turn onto a dirt path, weaving through cornfields, but the SUV stayed close, its driver relentless. In desperation, she veered toward an abandoned silo, its rusted frame barely visible in the moonlight. She slammed on the brakes, grabbed her backpack, and bolted into the field, the tall stalk swallowing her. The SUV stopped, and she heard doors slam, followed by footsteps crunching through the corn. Clara crouched low, clutching the knife, her breath ragged. The men's voices carried on the wind, clipped, professional, like hired muscle. "She's here somewhere," one said. "Find her. The boss wants that journal." Clara's mind raced. She couldn't outrun them, not at 62 with a bad knee. But she knew these fields, every ditch, every hideout. She crawled toward a drainage culvert, sliding into its damp, narrow mouth. The cold concrete pressed against her back as she waited, listening. The footsteps passed, then doubled back. Her fingers tightened around the knife, ready to fight if it came to that. The men searched for 20 agonizing minutes before retreating to their SUV, its engine fading into the distance. Clara waited another 10 before emerging, her clothes soaked with mud. The Buick was still drivable, though its bumper hung loose. She drove toward Grand Island, checking her mirrors obsessively, the journal's weight a constant reminder of the stakes. Maggie Voss's house was a tidy bungalow on the outskirts of town, its yard filled with native grasses and a weathered scarecrow from her inspecting days. Clara knocked, her nerves frayed, and was relieved when Maggie answered, a stout woman in her 70s with sharp eyes and a no-nonsense demeanor. "Clara Hensley," Maggie said, ushering her inside. "You look like you've been through a war. What's this about?" Clara spread the journal and binder on Maggie's kitchen table, explaining Samuel's disappearance, the co-op's experiments, and AgriCorps' pursuit. Maggie's face grew grim as she scanned the documents, her fingers tracing the chemical formulas. XZ-47, she muttered. "I saw reports about it years ago, unapproved, pulled from trials for toxicity. If AgriCorps was using it in Willow Creek, they were breaking every regulation in the book. Can you help me expose them?" Clara asked. "Samuel died for this. I need to make it right." Maggie nodded, her jaw set. "I've got contacts at the state AG board, people who aren't in AgriCorps' pocket. But we need more than this, hard evidence, like that sample Samuel took. Did he hide it anywhere?" Clara's mind flashed to the journal's last entry, took a sample. "If I don't make it, Ruth, get this to Clara." "He might have left it with Ruth," she said. "But AgriCorps' men were at the diner. I don't know if she got away." Maggie grabbed her phone. "I'll call a friend at the state police, get protection for Ruth. You stay here tonight. Tomorrow, we go back to Willow Creek. If that sample's still there, it's our best shot at nailing AgriCorps." Clara sank into a chair, exhaustion crashing over her. The journal lay open, Samuel's handwriting a lifeline across 18 years. She was close, so close, to uncovering the truth. But AgriCorps was closing in, and every step brought her deeper into their web. As Maggie made her call, Clara stared out the window, the Nebraska night pressing in. Somewhere out there, the men in the SUV were still hunting, and time was running out. Clara Hensley sat at Maggie Voss's kitchen table in Grand Island, Nebraska, the weight of Samuel's journal and the co-op binder anchoring her to the moment. The clock on the wall ticked past 2 a.m., each second a reminder of the danger closing in. AgriCorps' black SUV had chased her through the night, and Ruth Carter, who held Samuel's journal, might still be trapped at Mabel's diner. Maggie, the retired state agricultural inspector, hung up the phone, her face grim. "State police are on their way to Willow Creek," she said. "They'll check on Ruth and secure the diner. But we need that sample Samuel took, the XZ-47 powder. It's the only thing that'll prove AgriCorps' crimes." Clara's hands trembled as she opened the journal again, rereading Samuel's final entry, took a sample. "If I don't make it, Ruth, get this to Clara." "If Ruth hid it, it's probably still at the diner," Clara said. Samuel trusted her to keep it safe. Maggie nodded, grabbing her coat. "Then we go back. Now. My old Jeep's in the garage, less conspicuous than that Buick you rolled in with. We'll take backroads, avoid AgriCorps' goons." The drive to Willow Creek was tense, the Jeep's headlights cutting through the pre-dawn mist. Clara clutched the binder, its pages detailing AgriCorps' illegal experiments with XZ-47, a chemical that locked farmers into dependency by poisoning their soil. Samuel had died for uncovering it, and Clara was determined to finish his fight. As they neared town, Maggie's police scanner crackled with reports of a disturbance at Mabel's diner. Clara's stomach twisted. "Ruth," she whispered. They parked a block away, behind a shuttered feed store. The diner's neon sign flickered, casting an eerie glow over the empty street. 2 state police cruisers were already there, their lights flashing silently. Clara and Maggie crept closer, staying in the shadows. The diner's front door was ajar, the glass cracked. Inside, Ruth sat at a booth, shaken but unharmed, talking to a trooper. Clara exhaled, relief flooding her. "She's okay." Maggie approached the trooper, flashing her old state ID. "Margaret Voss, former AG inspector. This woman's got evidence tied to a corporate conspiracy. We need to secure it." The trooper, a young man with a skeptical frown, nodded after Maggie explained. Ruth led them to the kitchen, where she pulled a loose tile from the floor. Beneath it was a small plastic container, sealed tight. "Samuel gave me this the night before he vanished," Ruth said, her voice thick. "Said it was from the elevator. I never opened it." Clara took the container, her hand steady despite the adrenaline. Inside was a vial of gray powder, XZ-47. She handed it to Maggie, who tucked it into her coat. "This goes to the state lab," Maggie said. "They'll test it, confirm it's toxic. With the binder and journal, we've got enough to bury AgriCorps." A sudden screech of tires broke the silence. Clara spun, seeing the black SUV barreling down the street. The trooper drew his weapon, shouting for backup, but the SUV didn't stop. It swerved, aiming for the diner. Clara grabbed Ruth, pulling her behind the counter as the trooper fired a warning shot. The SUV skidded to a halt, and two men in dark jackets leapt out, guns drawn. "Stay down," Maggie hissed, shoving Clara and Ruth toward the back door. The trooper exchanged fire with the men, glass shattering as bullets tore through the diner's windows. Clara's heart pounded, but she kept moving, the binder and journal clutched to her chest. They stumbled into the alley, where Maggie's jeep waited. As they piled in, one of the men appeared at the alley's mouth, his gun raised. Maggie floored the gas, the jeep lurching forward, and the shot went wide, pinging off a dumpster. They sped out of Willow Creek, the police scanner crackling with reports of the shootout. Maggie's contact at the state AG board had already been alerted, and a federal investigation was in motion. Clara's mind raced, piecing together the final fragments of Samuel's story. He'd found the hidden room in the grain elevator, stolen a sample of XZ-47, and planned to expose Agricorp's scheme to control the land. They'd silenced him, but his evidence, his journal, the binder, the sample, had survived. 2 weeks later, Clara stood in her barn, the morning sun filtering through the slats. The air smelled of hay and old wood, a comfort that grounded her after the chaos. The vial of XZ-47 had tested positive for a banned chemical, toxic to soil and crops without Agricorp's proprietary additives. The binder's logs and Samuel's journal provided a paper trail, linking the experiments to Agricorp's executives, including Victor Crane and a shadowy board member named Ellen Price, who'd authorized Project Yield. Federal agents had raided Agricorp's offices, arresting Price and several others. Crane, who'd fled after their escape from Lincoln, was still at large, but the investigation was closing in. Ruth was safe, under protective custody until the trial. Harlan Tate, who'd held off Agricorp's men with his shotgun, had survived with minor injuries and was hailed as a local hero. Maggie Voss was working with the state to ensure the evidence reached the right hands, her old contacts proving invaluable. Willow Creek buzzed with gossip. Farmers who'd lost their land to Agricorp were filing lawsuits, and the co-op was under new management, promising transparency. Clara walked to the loft where she'd found Samuel's letter, the rusted tobacco tin still tucked beneath the floorboard. She opened it, pulling out a faded photo of her and Samuel, taken at a county fair in 1995. He was grinning, holding a blue ribbon for his restored tractor, his arm around her shoulders. Clara's eyes welled up, but she smiled. "You did it, Sam," she whispered. "We got them." She stepped outside, the wheat fields stretching golden under the Nebraska sky. The grain elevator still loomed over town, but its shadow felt lighter, less oppressive. Clara had spent 18 years haunted by Samuel's absence, but now she had closure. He'd fought for the land, for the farmers, for the truth. And she'd finished his fight. As she walked back to the farmhouse, Clara thought of the future. She'd plant a new crop next season, maybe join the co-op's rebuilding efforts. The land had been her family's lifeblood, and she'd honor it, just as Samuel had. The weather vane atop the barn creaked, its rooster spinning slowly in the breeze. For the first time in years, Clara felt at peace, the weight of the past settling into something she could carry.